What's good, everyone? Matt here from UK Nets Fans, and I'm joined by Aidan McConaughey and Cammy Anderson for another episode of BK to UK, the British Brooklyn Nets podcast. We'll be recapping the games against the Spurs and the Rockets, as well as looking ahead to the All-Star game, talking a lot about Blake Griffin, and revisiting our predictions from the start of the season and making some new ones now we've got the second half of the schedule in front of us. Make sure you're following us on Twitter and Instagram at UK Nets Fans, the pod itself on Twitter at BK to UK Pod, and check us out on YouTube where you can watch all of our episodes back. But yeah, this is the first pod in March, and off the back of a very, very successful February, Steve Nash and James Harden have both received Coach or Player of the Month honours. Guys, what do you think of a very, very successful February in all?
I mean, it feels like we come on here every single week and we're saying good things about James Harden because he seems to do something incredible every single week. So the fact that he got Player of the Month really wasn't a shock for me. For the same reasons that I said last week when he got Player of the Week, he's just been able to adjust consistently to the situations he's been given, and he's played at an MVP level standard while doing that. So yeah, I wasn't shocked at all that Harden got Player of the Month. In terms of Steve Nash, I think it's great that he got Coach of the Month. I think since he obviously was in charge of his first game for the Nets, he's improved greatly since that time. You can tell he's almost like a sponge at times with D'Antoni and Jack Vaughn, where he's just kind of taking on information. Even though he's in charge, he's not afraid to kind of take on their kind of feedback on board, and you can see that he's kind of improving as a coach due to that. And no disrespect to Kenny Atkinson, obviously his job is a lot harder at the time, but I just feel that Nash just has a better understanding of his rotations. He tends to make less silly errors at times, and even just knowing when to call a timeout at the right time is so important in basketball, but he seems to have got that down really well already. Even when we had that kind of minor rough stretch earlier on in the season, I didn't blame Nash too much for those losses. It was kind of silly player losses that were coming in. And I think especially over the month of February, he's just done his work to make life easier for the players in the court. And he's obviously succeeding, by getting the award.
I mean, I think they're both completely deserved accolades, given the kind of form we showed last month. I think it was only going to end up in kind of one place, the Coach of the Month and the Player of the Month. Harden was absolutely sensational and pretty much carried the team in the absence of both KD and Kyrie. And yeah, we've seen some fantastic basketball from Harden. He won that Player of the Week award. And yeah, I think, as I say, they were two very well-deserved awards because these are two guys who have the team, for different reasons, doing fantastic things. So yeah, long may this continue.
Yeah, really, as we say, it's hard to find more glowing praise to pour on this team since, especially since chatting about Harden's Player of the Week last week, Player of the Month on this pod. Starting off with Nash, it's the first Nets head coach to win since 2014, when Jason Kidd won it twice that year. This is our best pre-All-Star record since going 34-15 in 2002-2003 season. The Nets just so happened to go to the finals that year, so hopefully that's a nice omen. James Harden winning it for the 11th time in his career. The last time that a Net won Player of the Month was Vince Carter in April 2007. Over February, James Harden has averaged 25 points a game on 49% from the field, 42% from three, and 84% from the free throw line. 8.8 rebounds, an East lead-in 10.7 assists, 11 triple-doubles, 11 double-doubles, 3 triple-doubles, and the Nets went 9-4 in the whole of February. We've not lost a game. You know, it's weird being used to winning as a Nets fan. It's super, super weird. Do you guys think Harden should be in sort of league MVP talks?
I mean, I certainly think so, given the way he's played since he came to us, as Aidan rightly said. Came in and he's adapted to lots of different situations. He's really adapted the kind of style of play that he's become known for. It's no longer 40 minutes of Harden ISO ball. It's Harden and kind of the team together. He's, as well as he's playing, he's making everyone else around him play really well. He just seems to have developed a lot of understanding for the players in such a quick amount of time. I think it's about 23, 24 games now he's played roughly. So he's certainly not had a lot of time to get used to his teammates, but you can kind of see as the games have went on, he's just getting better and better. Joe Harris was recent on the Woj pod and described him as the best passer of the ball he's ever played with. And yeah, you can't really argue with that. Some of the passing that Harden's showed lately has been nothing short of sensational. And I think if we're to say any Nets up for MVP conversation, it's got to be Harden, purely for the fact that both KD and Kyrie have missed a lot of time for injury. Kyrie's also played fantastic, and so's KD. And I think KD could certainly win the MVP if it wasn't for being out for as long as he has. Obviously, multiple reasons for that. But I think Harden's certainly in the conversation for MVP in the league.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about it, especially over the last couple of weeks in the media, where some kind of big names in the media have came out and said that they think Harden is the MVP purely for how he has adapted his game since he's came to the Nets. I mean, we were talking about it at the start of the year. I remember the Glue guys made a really interesting point that the MVP is usually given to someone when there's kind of specific scenario around them. Obviously, Kevin Durant was coming off a really serious injury. I mean, the way he was playing the first couple of weeks, anyone would have banked him for the MVP just because he's came back from that adversity and done so well. And the league seems to like that type of thing when given the award. And obviously, the scenario with Harden is a difficult one. He wasn't very well liked after that Houston trade, after what went down there. And he's just came in, showed so much maturity, and he just came in and done his job. And he's done it at an MVP level. And I just think he should be in there with the Joel Embiids and the LeBrons of the world in terms of the conversation. I don't think he'll get it. It never seems to be a player that gets traded mid-season that gets the award. And yeah, he just doesn't seem to be getting named enough to be at that level. But I think he's definitely the MVP on the Nets, and he's definitely should be in the conversation for MVP in the league.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. He won't get it, but yeah, I would feel a lot better if he were at least mentioned in these conversations, because the numbers he's putting up, the role he's playing, the way he's adapted his game, the way he's fit in to a new team, the factors affecting this whole league has just kind of thrown everyone off. Kind of deserves sort of praise, I think. So yeah, it would be nice to see him more in there. But he, and maybe he's won his MVP. So there's a little bit of recognition there. But talking about recognition, he is an all-star, and all-star weekend is upon us. Scary hours are coming to Atlanta. We won't touch on this massively, but KD, who obviously missed the game through some injury recovery, did select Kyrie Irving with his first pick, the second overall pick, as an NBA All-Star captain. And he also picked up James Harden with the first pick of the reserves. What are your guys' kind of just broad thoughts about the All-Star game, All-Star weekend? Are you a bit disappointed that we won't see KD playing in the All-Star game alongside his Nets companions?
Definitely sad that we won't see all three on the court at the same time. I think, obviously, when James Harden came to the Nets, that was an exciting thought for Nets fans, that we may see three Nets All-Stars on the court at the one time, potentially even all starting, which could have happened at one point. And I think probably because we're not going to see all three of them on the court at the same time, I think that's played a factor in my lack of excitement for the All-Star game. I mean, I was thinking about it the other day, deciding I'm actually going to watch the game or not. And I'm going to watch it purely because you have to enjoy the plaudits that the Nets are receiving at the moment while we've got such a talented team. These are the good old days, and you've got to appreciate these times, I think. And Kyrie is kind of like the unofficial captain of the team. Well, KD isn't there, obviously being the first pick. And he's actually my prediction for the game MVP. I hope he just goes out there and has a lot of fun, because I think Kyrie, he's obviously had some tough times this year. They've not been too reported. It's been kind of kept under wraps, but he's clearly had some difficulties in his personal life. And yet he's played so incredible throughout it when he has been on the court. And he deserves to be honoured for how talented he is. And I just hope that he goes out there and just shows everyone how good he is, to be honest with you. And I think Team Irvin will win it.
I'm going to stick with what Aidan said. Team Irvin are going to win this one, and purely for all the James Harden to Zion Williamson lobs. I'm going to be watching that all night, and just the thought of those happening is a fantastic thought. But two fantastic teams, and it is a real shame that the All-Star game isn't a kind of serious game. Also, it's all there for fun, all there to celebrate the players, and you'll maybe get one or two good plays where everyone's really going at it. But I can't help but wonder what a game this would be if all the players actually went full kind of pelt at it, because there's some of the names in the teams and just some of the starting fives. I know you've got scary hours, but these teams are 5 absolute superstars on each side, and yeah, it wouldn't be possible in an NBA team. I mean, I don't think it would be anyway. But yeah, I think it's going to be a really good game, even though we're not going to see all 3 of our guys on the court together. Obviously, that's a real shame, but the fact that they are still getting recognised, I think, means a lot and shows how far we've come in recent years.
Yeah, the All-Star game itself is I never really get that up for it. I think even with the Nets players that are involved this year, it's definitely given me a little bit more excitement about it. But as you say, because it's that lack of competitiveness, because we see so much basketball all week and we see so many highlights from these players in their like practicing what they do, you know, having like the sort of the shimmer of the All-Star game was almost a bit like, well, yeah, but it means more when they're trying hard, I think. So I think it kind of does lose some of its luster. I'll watch it, obviously. But yeah, the game itself is, I can kind of take or leave. It's not serious. I think it will be a bit your turn, our turn. But then again, last year's All-Star game was really, really good. Obviously, with all the ties it kind of had to the Bryant family tragedy, I think helped a lot in it meaning a lot more. Obviously, I think it will have the same format as it did last year as we will this year. So time will tell. But obviously, it's not All-Star weekend anymore. It's just All-Star in the day with the skills challenge going on, the star-studded dunk contest with, you know, 2 out of the 3 of them I hadn't heard of. I know I'm a massive Nets stan. I don't watch enough. That's obviously more of a reflection on me. But if it's all-star caliber players, you know, you shouldn't have to double check who they play for. But talk about star-studded. The 3-point contest is absolutely star-studded. You got your Steph Currys and I think Jaylen Brown's on there and Dame Lillard and stuff. But one person who should rightly be there, the best 3-point shooter in the league, Joseph Malcolm Harris, isn't in that 3-point contest. What do you guys think about that? Has he been snubbed?
I mean, I don't think it's so much snubbed. I'm sure I'd seen it kind of politely kind of declined the request. He's kind of been in the past 2 or the past 3 seasons. So having won it previously, he's maybe felt, right, well, I'd rather keep the memories that way. Or he's thought, I'm too good. I don't want to embarrass these boys. I'll let them have the moment in the kind of limelight. But yeah, I think the fact that Joe is the best 3-point shooter in the league and not actually in the competition's a little bit sad, because it'd be nice to see him kind of just prove it on the grand stage. Because I think there's still a lot of folk who doubt Joe Harris. Despite that, there's been comments that it was one of the, I think Aidan had mentioned a previous podcast about how the commentator said, "Oh, I had a fantastic night. He'll not have that very often," and it's like he has it nearly every night. But folk just don't really appreciate him. So it'd be nice to kind of see that, and he'd really solidify himself as maybe not the 4th star in this team, but certainly a player who people should respect. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen him there, but I'll still watch it because I think the 3-point contest is absolutely fantastic. Just seeing them knock down every single shot is incredible.
Yeah, just quickly going back to what you said about the dunk contest, Matt, it genuinely looks like they've went to 3 different teams and went, do you want to chuck a guy in here and we can just have a go at it? Because I think it'll be one of like the least watched dunk contests you'll ever see. But in terms of Joe Harris, yeah, I saw that too, Cammy. I've seen a couple of people saying that he's opted out. I've never kind of seen it officially, but that seems to be the rumour. But obviously all the guys that are actually in the competition are playing in the All-Star game. So it's almost like the NBA have said, they've kind of taken the criticism on board and said it's going to be safer if we just bring in guys that are already here. And I mean, I think last year, I think the skills challenge was the one that was watched the most over the 3-point contest, which is usually the kind of leaders, maybe they're kind of prioritising that and they're bringing some guys in there and making that a bigger deal this year. But yeah, Joe Harris should be in there. He's one of the best three-point shooters in the league. And maybe if he was asked to go, yeah, you're probably right, Cam. He's probably went, what's the point? I mean, I go out there, I catch COVID, and then I can't play for like a week or something like that. You really can't underestimate how seriously these guys are taking this league, and every game counts. And yeah, potentially that's in there as well. But yeah, I said last week, I said if they put Joe Harris in the 3-point contest, I'd be more excited about the All-Star day. But yeah, the fact he won't be in there, I probably won't watch it.
Yeah, nice. I'd rather have, league stats and coming out on top of that at the end of the season rather than, another 3-point All-Star weekend trophy to add to his collection. But yeah, great point about him just not wanting to go to Atlanta, which I think they're a little bit lax as well in that state. I given to believe with the kind of wearing of masks and getting in obviously huge multi-person events and stuff like that. So yeah, I think he's just gone, nah, I'm all right, mate. So that's cool. I don't think we can go much further without talking about the big news of the week, and that is all about Blake Griffin. Blake Griffin officially got bought out of his contract with the Pistons, making him an unrestricted free agent once he clears waivers. He gave back $13 million of his salary. What do you guys think about Blake Griffin and his fit on this Nets team?
I mean, I saw a few people talking about it, and it's the perfect example to use the whole Louis Scola thing when he was at the Nets. Louis Scola is referred to as the prophet of the Nets because when he was playing for the Nets about 5 or 6 years ago, he was in an interview and he famously said, once they win, they will get everyone they want. And this is exactly what's happening here. Previous All-Stars get bought out, and the first name that they want to come to is the Brooklyn Nets. And I couldn't be more excited about it, to be honest with you. I mean, the Nets have kind of never had that traditional power forward in the team in the last good few years or so. And I think it just gives us another option that we could work with, and it will be really beneficial. I mean, obviously, Blake's kind of seen a bit of a decline in his performance over the last couple of years. He had some nasty injuries last season, but it doesn't stop him from being a big body. He's a really, really good passer, and he's developed a 3-point game over the last few years that is above average. So who knows? You never know as well. With Harden being in there, he might start showing his kind of bounciness again. I think the beauty about this move is it's essentially a freebie. I mean, if he ends up being excellent, then great. If not, you've kind of got a really good vet there in the team that could do wonders for someone like a Nick Claxton or something like that, if he gets a chance to work with him. He's obviously, yeah, as I mentioned, he's had injury issues, but yeah, in 2018-19, he was in the All-NBA team. I think he got 25, 7, and 5. I mean, that was only 2 years ago. And yeah, just don't underestimate how good the Nets are at getting players back to a high standard. I mean, you just need to ask DeMarre Carroll or Jeff Green, who have came to the Nets and they've completely brought their careers back to a good level. So yeah, who knows? Blake could come back and it could be absolutely fantastic.
I mean, it's a pity it's not the Blake Griffin from a few seasons ago, obviously the wildly athletic one who was dunking tons. One of the stats that's kind of been bandied about lately is the fact he's not dunked since 2019, which is absolutely insane. Obviously, he's kind of got styrofoam legs, so that doesn't really help in that regard. But a thing that I'd kind of thought of it was, with the Nets so cautious on the way they approach injuries, I don't know if they could maybe solve something with Blake's knees. Obviously, I think they're probably goosed and beyond complete repair. But I don't know if there's maybe something that the Nets could do, given the way we have treated stuff in the past. Could us taking a different approach to his load management or whatever change things? I'm not too sure. I think some of the stats this season have been particularly worrying. StatMuse put out a tweet that highlighted the fact that he's had 12.3 points in 31.3 minutes per night this season, 36.5% from the field and 31.5% from free, which ranks him second worst in both categories for players with 10 field goal attempts a night and at least 6 3-point attempts a night. I mean, it really doesn't look good in looking at it like that, but even still, I think he's probably not going to be a starter. He'll be on the second unit. He's a player who can still provide something, and when you consider who he's been playing with in Detroit compared to who he'll play with in Brooklyn, surely he's going to be a bit better. When you're playing with better people, you get better yourself. When you're kind of seen as the main guy and you're kind of struggling, I can imagine that's really hard and could explain why he's not done quite as well. But obviously, having that kind of load taken off, we didn't have KD, Kyrie, and Harden, obviously, and then Blake can obviously score points. If he gets kind of 12, 13 off the bench each night, I mean, I'd quite happily take that from a bench player. Most of our bench players kind of get that. So if we're getting that, yeah, fantastic. And given his kind of past, I can only hope that he can maybe return to his Duncan days, because we've now got 2/3 Lob City Clippers.
How annoyed would Chris Paul be if DeAndre Jordan and Blake Griffin won a chip before he did? Especially considering the level he's playing at as well. He's absolutely fantastic. And yeah, it would be funny to see. And obviously even would be incredible to see them both do it in a Nets uniform. But one thing I did think of is you'd kind of assume that even though Blake got sort of blackballed by his own team in Detroit and told to sit, he'd probably still be getting all the COVID testing and all that kind of stuff. So he's ready to play, I should imagine. Going back to what you were saying, Cammy, on, I think he was meant to be the man in Detroit. So kind of any production less than kind of that standard, especially when you were earning the kind of money he was earning, is just going to look terrible. I remember when we played Detroit, he kind of just looked a bit like he didn't really want to run after the game. I don't know if it's kind of his knees are just filled with dust or whatever it might be. Like you'd kind of see something like we'd break away and transition or whatever, and he just wouldn't even track back. And that could either be just sheer, oh, for God's sake, I can't believe with this rubbish, or it could be his knees being goosed. But there is a question to be said in terms of fit. Who do you think Blake takes the most minutes away from?
I mean, I think it's quite hard to say, because based on a current lineup, I couldn't imagine Blake starting, as I've already said. And then given it's kind of second unit, will probably be playing in, it'll be, I mean, yeah, nobody that I think would really miss. Jeff Green might suffer a little. Obviously, Nick Claxton, who's come into the team since his recovery, he might suffer, but he can also play at the 5 as well. So maybe he won't suffer. It might benefit him a little bit more because he's getting to focus more on the centre position. And also we'll have the opportunity to play alongside Blake on the court as well. So I don't know if anyone will be massively kind of impacted. Probably the bottom of the bench guys affected more than the kind of ones near the top end. But yeah, we'll just kind of to wait and see.
Yeah, I think there's certainly minutes to be had there. I think Andre Robertson, who knows what they're going to do with him? They might not even re-sign him. He's been playing quite a lot of minutes recently. Obviously, a lot of that's down to Jeff Green being out. But I saw someone putting out that Blake Griffin is a good insurance for Jeff Green. Obviously, he had quite a nasty shoulder injury, which has kept him out for a couple of quite a few games. So there's maybe a bit of insurance there, just having a player like that. I think for me, it'll be DeAndre Jordan, actually. I think if they are planning on playing Blake as a small ball 5, and they tend to go down that route kind of more often, except from maybe against someone like a Joel Embiid or something like that, then maybe it's DeAndre Jordan who'll get less minutes. I'd be really disappointed if it did impact Nick Claxton. I think he's definitely seen more minutes because Jeff Green's been out as well. But yeah, I think if you're going off who deserves to get their minutes taken off them, I'd probably say DeAndre Jordan deserves some minutes taken off him, and there's definitely minutes to be had there. But yeah, I just really hope it doesn't impact Clax's minutes, because I think he's developing really nicely.
Nice. Yeah, I think throughout this whole thing, I've just been asking myself, when the question like, do you want Blake? My answer has always been, well, would you swap him for Iman Shumpert? And the answer is obviously yes. And I think Iman Shumpert's been on this team a couple of months now. I think I don't know. I'd have to have a look at when he actually signed, but he's probably only played 20 minutes of basketball for us in total, like with his hamstring and all this kind of stuff. So if I was him, I'd be too embarrassed to take the check from the Nets, to be honest. But if you'd swap Blake in for whatever minutes Iman Shumpert would have had, but yeah, I guess time will tell. But yeah, one of them, another nice problem to have. Hopefully, as you say, with the medical staff and the kind of refresh of situation that Blake's going to have coming from Detroit to Brooklyn. You know, maybe he finds that extra gear and we see the best Blake we've seen in a couple of years. But if he is going to play small ball 5 for us, his old Detroit Pistons teammate, Bruce Brown, will be able to give him some pointers. So we got nothing to worry about there. But so that's that. We actually had a listener question on this from George from our Discord community on Blake Griffin. He said, is Blake Griffin the right fit, or would you rather try and trade for Cedi Osman? And I'm going to be completely honest. I've not watched a great deal of Cedi Osman. 4th year forward playing for the Cavs. I don't think he brings anything that we don't already have. There's only 2 players I want from Cleveland. One of them has a massive afro and we gave him to Cleveland. And the other one is Andre Drummond. What did you guys think of this? Just while we're on Blake.
I don't think Blake's essentially the right fit. I don't think he fits all of our problems, but he's not the wrong fit, if you know what I mean. I mean, he's a good player, and like I even though he's kind of taken a big drop in quality, he's still a good player, and he's got the talent there, and he's got good experience. So yeah, I don't see it as a bad move at all. I mean, because we're signing him as a free agent as well, it gives us flexibility. If we wanted to sign a Cedi Osman or a JaVale McGee or something like that, we've still got that flexibility because we've signed a free agent. We've not had to move pieces, and we've still got some stuff there. So for me, it'd be to sign Blake Griffin because we've not had to give anything up at all. But I can see why George asked that question, because I saw the article about Cedi Osman and them shopping them and the Nets being interested. But I wouldn't look too deep into the Nets looking at anyone, because anytime someone seems to be made available, the Nets seem to have a look at it. So.
I mean, I think if you're kind of putting 2 options on the table, it's Blake or Cedi Osman, you're taking Blake Griffin every single time, even though his knees are kind of goose, as we've already said. Although past performance isn't a guarantee of future performance, I'd certainly rather bank on Griffin than I would Osman, who hasn't kind of had the same accolades as Griffin. Of course, he's not been in the league as long, but I can't see Osman between now and the end of his career making the All-Star team 6 times like Griffin has. So look at it like that. I think Griffin would certainly be my choice, and I'd like to keep Osman in Cleveland because a few years ago I had him on my GM save on 2K. He turned into an absolute demigod, and I'd like to keep those memories of him like that rather than him coming in and being absolutely rubbish. So yeah, Blake Griffin every time for me.
Nice, that's pretty unanimous. Thanks for the question anyway, George. So with All-Star Weekend in sight, that brings us on to looking towards the second half of the season. The NBA released the second half of the schedule a little while ago now, but we thought we'd take a look to see what stood out for us. Lads, what jumps out to you looking at the teams we're going to face after the All-Star break?
As UK Nets fans, the thing that jumped out to me most was the tip-off times in some of these games. We've been blessed by the schedule timing gods and have some games at 7:30, some at 8, some at 8:30, which is obviously a great change from the 1 in the morning start some nights. There are some later games. I think later on in the month we play the Jazz and Blazers in kind of a back-to-back out west, and they're both 2 or 3 in the morning, which is a bit rubbish. But I mean, for the most part, the schedule looks quite good. I'm quite happy with it for the rest of this month, aside from the Jazz and Portland games. I think the schedule's actually quite kind to us. We're playing a lot of the lesser teams in the league who've not really done well. I know we play the Pistons, we play the Timberwolves, I think we've got the Rockets again. So, I mean, yeah, that's certainly good. April's a little bit more difficult than March, but then May looks very, very difficult. We kind of start that with a game against Portland, a back-to-back versus the Bucks, and then play the Mavs in a 4-game stretch, which by that stage of the season, there will only be about 10 or so games left. That could be the difference between us finishing first or second in the East. So I think they're going to be some huge, huge games for us.
Yeah, as soon as the schedule got announced, I hopped on Tankathon, which is a really good website that's worth checking out, which do all the kind of draft stuff, but they also do who's got the toughest schedule in the NBA. So I hopped on to see what they were saying, and they said that the Nets have actually got the 3rd easiest remaining schedule, which is obviously really nice. And then I checked Philly next, and they've got the 6th easiest. So who's got the easiest schedule? Let's say the Utah Jazz, which is the only team in the NBA that currently have single-digit losses. So they must be playing really well so far. So something that stood out for me, obviously we've got 20 televised games, which is only one short of the Lakers this year, which is quite incredible considering they're the most watched basketball team on the planet. In terms of the kind of games I'm excited for and what stood out, I think at the first half of the season, I was most excited for kind of like the Lakers and the Clippers. But I don't know about you, but I think I'm most excited about playing the Knicks again. I can't wait to play the Knicks. We've got 2 games against them, and obviously the first game we just had KD, we didn't have Harden or Kyrie, so it'll be good to see the Nets playing in full strength against them. Also excited to play against Philly for the final time, because obviously we split the first 2 games. I think I read as well that there was 7 back-to-backs during the second half, which is quite a lot, which is obviously kind of nice for us, because it's always kind of good going into a game knowing that you're playing again the next day. But it's obviously really difficult for the team. So I do expect to kind of see some of the stars sitting in certain games once we've kind of solidified a good playoff spot. But yeah, I think it's important though this time, like when we do rest players, that we only rest one at a time. We still have 2 stars in the court, because it is a bit brutal sometimes just watching one of them try and put the entire team in their back. So hopefully they only rest one at a time. But yeah, I think same with Cammy. I really liked that we've got quite a few. I think it's 3 Sundays in a row where we're playing at like 7:30 or 8 o'clock, which is just absolutely great, because we've not had that at all. I know. So I think the Discord live game chat will be absolutely lit come those games. So
be popping off. No, yeah, it looks the first thing that I kind of thought with the second half schedule getting announced was, I think we must be in the Nets must be in the minority where we haven't had any games postponed. So I think that's going to take a bit more of a factor. I don't know how many of sort of the teams that we'll kind of be facing as our main competition will need to find extra games to kind of slot in elsewhere. But I thought that was something to consider. And also, yeah, I think you're going to be right where we might see a little bit more injury recovery rearing its head, especially with those 7 back-to-backs. Yeah, there's a stretch. I've got it here. Sort of the end of April into May, we face in Phoenix, Indiana, Toronto twice, Portland, Milwaukee twice, Dallas, and Denver in that stretch, which is a tough old stretch. And like you say, but I'm really happy at the moment with how it's looking and how it's shaping up. I think, this team being is kind of getting used to each other as we are and building that chemistry. I think it feels like we're just getting stronger and stronger. And the more we go on, the better we'll get to know each other. And the more chance of winning these close games we will be. That kind of losing to teams sub 500 seems to have slipped away a little bit as well, which is nice to see. So hopefully we can just keep it competitive and just keep these winning habits rolling. And we won't be too far away. I also agree with you, Aidan, where I think it feels like the kind of this King of New York stuff is starting to get a little bit more. The stakes are becoming a little bit higher. Obviously, the Knicks are having a fantastic season by their standards. So I think it would wrench even more if we did lose to the Knicks, especially because you just wouldn't hear the end of it on Twitter. But yeah, I'm sure we'll get more onto the Knicks as and when we play them. But yeah, it's looking really positive, I think, for the Nets. But just how positive are we feeling? We need to stick our colours on the mast. Before the season started, we all gave our predictions. We thought we'd have a stab at the record, the seed, our team MVP, our team breakout star, and give an oddly specific prediction for the first half of this season. And we've gone back just to see how way off we were or how spot on we were. Guys, let's have a little talk through our old predictions. Let's start with the record. I'll go first, and I said we'd be on 26-10 for this first half. And we'd end the season 50 wins with 22 losses. That's not too bad. Obviously, we're currently, as we record the pod, we're on 24 and 13. So I'm pretty chuffed with that. How did you guys get on with the half season record prediction?
I said 27 and 9. And I said the Nets were going to stay in single digits for losses. And then, I said 50-22 as well, Matt. It's funny because I've wrote down what I've said for all of them, and I've got an excuse next to every single one of them, so I look really pathetic. But my excuse is for this one that if Kevin Durant wasn't out for test tracing, then we'd probably still be in single digits for losses.
So I was the same as you, Matt. I said 26 and 10 for the first half, and by the end of the season, I said we'd be 51 and 21. Although that hasn't happened, I'm going to, for a remaining, I think, 35 games, we've actually played 37 in the first half, unknown to us at the time of making that prediction. So I'm going to say we're going to finish the kind of second half of the season 25 and 10.
Nice. I like that. Yeah. I don't think we're too far off. Obviously, we are a completely different animal from what we were. Little did we know what would happen in this first half of the season. Seed. Last time I had us down as finishing at the 3 seed. I've really, really pushed the boat out. I've become more confident. I reckon we're going to get finishing second now. What do you guys think? Where do you guys have us seed wise?
Yeah, I think I said that we'd be the 1 seed. And I do stick with that. I think just with the momentum we've built that we'll continue to grow a record. And I think that Philly will probably see some injury issues down the line. Embiid never plays a full season. So I think that they'll start to drop a few games and go off the rails a wee bit. So I think we'll finish in first still.
I said we'd be second come this kind of stage of the season. That's where we are now. So obviously I've managed to get something right for a change. I do, however, believe, like Aidan, that we will be the 1 seed come the end of the season, just given the way we've kind of turned things around. We've really found form, and we just look really difficult to stop now. So I think we'll be first in the East come the end of the season.
Nice. Then we went a little bit more esoteric about it. We thought not the league MVP, but the Nets MVP. I think this was pretty unanimous. I went with KD. But I have changed my tune. Before I reveal who it is, what guys remind me what you guys had for the league for our team MVP?
So I'd said KD like yourself, and I think we're on the same kind of train of thought here with regards to changing the MVP. And I think it's going to be the exact same reason, although in about 20 seconds time, you'll probably name a different player, so it'll mean nothing. But anyway, my MVP now is going to be James Harden. Without doubt, as I said earlier on in the podcast, KD has played at an MVP level, but I think the fact that he's missed so many games will hamper his chances. Harden's coming in, as we've already said earlier on, MVP caliber, and I think he's going to be the MVP now and MVP of the team as well.
I actually said Kyrie Irving. I think I was the only one that said Kyrie. I felt he was going to have a really good year, and I still think he has had a brilliant year. I just felt with KD kind of coming back off the injury that he maybe have played kind of less games due to kind of injury recovery than he actually has. And he was certainly the MVP. But I'm the same as you guys. James Harden, definitely. Well, Matt, you've not said yet, but I assume it's going to be James Harden. So I've said it a couple of times in the pod already. He's the team MVP, if not the league MVP.
Well, it's not going to surprise you, lads. It's 3 for 3. I had KD, exactly the same as you, Cammy. Unfortunately, the narrative was there of him coming back after that devastating injury and just picking up exactly where he left off. But he's just not played enough games. Unless he comes back after the All-Star break and starts, averaging 40 and 15 or something. I don't know. But I don't see it happening. James Harden, for the reasons we've spoken about at length on this pod already, I think he's going to be the Nets' most valuable player. But Matt's huge shout to Kyrie Irving because he's quietly scoring a ton of points on really efficient shooting, and that can't be sniffed at. So huge shout out to him. This is where it starts getting a little bit funky for me. It was breakout star for this season. And I had Spencer Dinwiddie. Obviously, he went down, I think, within the first week of the season. We don't know whether or not we'll see him suit up in a Nets uniform again. Go back and listen to last week's pod if you want to hear our thoughts on that one. But who did you guys have as your breakout star?
I had Landry Shamet down, which is a kind of an interesting one because I remember at the time I said it thinking he's obviously not played for the Nets yet, but I just felt from him coming over that he would have improved his game. And yeah, I was very, very wrong at the start. He wasn't playing well. But in terms of as the season's progressed, Landry Shamet probably is the breakout star because he has kind of constantly improved. But yeah, I'm gonna say for the rest of the season, the breakout star is going to be the man on everyone's lips at the moment. It's Nick Claxton.
So my breakout star was Karis LeVert. Obviously, he's now been traded away. So my prediction hasn't been wrong. He could still be a breakout star, just not with the Nets. So I'm going to stretch that one and say that's still a possibility. I think there was a report out that he could be back at some point this month for the Pacers. So if he hits the ground running, then yeah, maybe my prediction will come true. As with Aidan, I'm going to go with my new best mate, Nick Claxton, for the breakout star for the remainder of the season.
Nice technicality you got us on there, Cammy. Massive honourable mention to Nick Claxton. I went a little bit different. Obviously, he's been out for a little while due to his health, but I think for the season so far, I think our breakout star has been Jeff Green. I think he's been hugely important to us. He's massively overperforming for that vet's minimum contract that we've got him on. Really hope that shoulder injury doesn't roll on. I've got a sneaky suspicion that KD, Jeff Green, TLC are all out until All-Star, and they're just kind of walking it back really slowly. But that's my breakout star. I think he's had a really good season. I hope he remains in net for a very, very long time. But yeah, Uncle Jeff for me. Another one, which these were always going to be a little bit weird because these were oddly specific predictions for this season. And my oddly specific prediction was that Taurean Prince would have a career year. Maybe I can pull a Cammy and say, he might have a career year in Cleveland, but I've already seen him being in some trade talks, so I'm not quite sure how that'll go. I've got another one for this season, and it involves our favourite three-point specialist, Joe Harris. I've said my new oddly specific prediction for the rest of the season is that Joe Harris will have a Ray Allen moment, scoring a huge bucket for this Nets team in a crucial moment. I can't say any more specific than that, but that's what I think will happen. What about you guys?
So my oddly specific from the kind of first set of predictions was about the man himself, Joey Buckets, and that was that he'd be the best three-point shooter in the league, and that's been the case. So unfortunately, I can't give anyone the lottery numbers, but I'm fairly chuffed with that prediction. As for this kind of second half of the season, my oddly specific is going to be James Harden's going to have more triple-double games than he doesn't.
Ooh, I like that.
It's a very good one.
Very cool.
Yeah. I said, I kind of got a few funny looks when I said this at the time. I remember I said my oddly specific prediction was that Kyrie would have an injury-free season. Now, before we kind of go into the games that Kyrie sat out, he was obviously out for personal reasons. He's been out with a back injury at times. I personally don't think there was a back injury there. And then there was injury recovery with his shoulder. These are all just fancy terms for rest. And I personally still stick with the idea that he hasn't had an injury this season. I think he's already played more games than he did last season, which is great. So yeah, I'm going to stick to say that one's came in. In terms of going on for the rest of the year, wee bit boring, but I think with the news that's came out around Blake Griffin, I think come playoff time, DeAndre Jordan will be out of the rotation. That's my prediction. I think just with the Nets liking going small, and when we start playing against good teams, I think that they'll tend to go for that small ball Nets lineup going forward, and I think he'll see less minutes, and then eventually I don't think he'll be getting any minutes at all.
Interesting. I guess we'll have to wait and see until the end of the season to see how how spot on that is. We also had a chat about who were our biggest rivals in the East for this season. For our regular season, I said our biggest rival would be the Bucks, and in the playoffs, it would be the Sixers. I've changed my tune. The playoffs rivals, as in who I think is going to give us the most trouble coming out of the East, remains the 76ers. But I think our biggest regular season rival is the New York Knicks. I don't think we've got anything else to prove against regular season teams in the East. I'm really confident that we'll get a top 4 finish. Like I say, I think we'll finish top 2 now. But I think just in terms of narrative and drama and all that sort of stuff, I think, you know, we're in the midst of having a really, really special rivalry with the Knicks, I think. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I was the exact same as you, Matt. I think me, you, and Theo from Met the Criteria said all the same, that we all said that it was going to be the Bucks were going to cause us problems in the regular season, then it was going to be the Sixers. Obviously, the Sixers have been the team in the East so far, so I'll change it to say that they'll be our biggest rivals in the regular season. But I'm going to think bigger picture when it comes to the playoffs, because I think the Nets will come out of the East. And I think we need to start looking at the West for our biggest rivals now. And I think the Utah Jazz or the Clippers are my 2 teams that I think will do really well. And we might end up meeting them at the end.
So for the kind of regular season rivals, I think I went for the Bucks. Now the Bucks are just right behind us, so I guess I've not been too far off there, but I am going to change that to the 76ers, as you have both said, the kind of team that's leading the way at the moment. And then in the playoffs, I said the kind of biggest rivals would be the Celtics. Obviously, things haven't went quite as well for the Celtics as I kind of expected they would. So I'm going to change that to the 76ers. But I do like Aidan's thinking right ahead to those finals, because I'd like to hope that we do make it there. And then, yeah, I guess that is where the biggest rivals will be if we get past everyone else.
Yeah, I loved the little exchange that the Glue Guys had on Twitter recently. Obviously, Glue Guy, can we say Glue Guys friend of the pod now? Because we got another little shout out. Definitely, basically our best mates. Saying like, we need to stop with all this. But how are you going to stop Joel Embiid argument? Because you could say that to every team. But, you know, I think their argument was, you know, you could let Joel Embiid score 40 every night. The Nets are going to score 120. So you need to find, you know, 80 points from, you know, Tobias Harris and Ben Simmons. And that's just not going to happen. But I think that is a chat for another day. Really, really cool predictions. I like that. But there were actually some Brooklyn Nets games in this past week that we can finally get around to. On Monday, we had an overtime win in San Antonio. The Nets winning 124-113. Dejounte Murray scoring at the buzzer, but the Nets score 16 points in overtime and limit the Spurs to just 5 points to take the W. Brooklyn win their 6th straight road game and their first road win in San Antonio for 19 years. Lads, what were you doing 19 years ago?
I was probably still in nappies about 19 years ago. In fact, no, that's not right. I would have been about 3 or 4 by then. So yeah, definitely wouldn't have been. I mean, I don't remember anyway. But yeah, 19 years ago, well, I didn't really know about basketball at all, I guess. But yeah, in terms of this game itself, this was the Nick Claxton show. This was his coming out party after kind of coming back from injury. And what a phenomenal impact he made all night. Just 13 points in the first half. He only played 9 minutes and finished the night with 17 points and 3 blocks. And if we can do this regularly, we're going to be absolutely laughing. And the fact that he managed this in just about 18 minutes, I mean, yeah, it is absolutely fantastic. He obviously went on to perform really well later on in the week. And I mean, yeah, I think this is the Claxton that a lot of people were really, really hyped about. We were all not so sure on him, but he certainly proved us wrong with his performance in this one. I think a very tight and competitive game for the first kind of 3 quarters. Game was still back and forth, and then we took, I think, a 12-point lead, and it was like, yeah, this is it, that's it, done. And then obviously the DeJounte Murray like last millisecond shot, how that went in, I've no idea. The fact he was rolling about on the ground, didn't even have possession of the ball, and yeah, that overtime starting at 3:45 in the morning here in the UK was definitely not what I wanted. And then the fact we went and blew them out in overtime as well, just made it that bit more annoying to think we could have just held on for another millisecond or so, and we wouldn't have had to have waited another 10 or so minutes. But yeah, absolutely delighted that we managed to get this win against a team who've clearly been a bogey team for us when we've faced them out there.
Yeah, I mean, it was really nice to get a bounce back win after that rough night against the Mavericks. But you're spot on, Cammy. They really didn't have to let this one go to overtime, and it somehow happened. It just came out of nowhere. Obviously, the Nets were on a really nice streak in the fourth quarter, and then the Spurs just kind of sneakily pulled back. And as you mentioned, obviously they hadn't won in San Antonio for 19 years before this one, and it felt like that streak was just going to keep on going. It just felt like it's just one of these things that's never going to end. But the Nets did enough in overtime to get the win. Some really nice stat lines from the night. Obviously, when you get games that go into overtime, you sometimes see kind of inflated stats that you can kind of take with a pinch of salt. But I mean, James Harden being the first player in NBA history to get 30 plus points, 10 plus rebounds and 15 plus assists with 0 turnovers is absolutely god tier. And to go along with that as well, Big Nick Claxton, career high 17 points with another 3 blocks and a steal. This guy's really kind of putting his name out there, and he's getting talked around the league quite a lot. So that's nice to see too. I mean, in terms of the Spurs, they're a good team. We kind of touched on it last week when we were doing the preview for the next week. Any Greg Popovich team's a good team, and there's kind of no two doubts about it that they're always going to make life difficult for you. And the win probably should have been more comfortable, but at the end of the season, all you remember is who won the game, and so you can be happy with this one.
Yeah, exactly. You guys have hit all the nails on the head. Harden going bananas. Claxton 17 points in 17 minutes as well. Really, really cool. Like you say, hopefully his play will continue and he'll keep getting minutes and all that sort of stuff as the roster becomes a bit more established going into the playoffs. But yeah, like you said, I think I'm almost the captain of the let's chill on Nicholas Claxton team, but I have been absolutely proven wrong because he's got a really, really bright future. And he balled out. James Harden balled out, and James Harden kept balling out. As we went on to Wednesday with a massive win against his former team. We went into Houston and we won 132-114. The James Harden revenge game, I've dubbed it. I mean, a nice video package, a news that the Rockets will tire Harden's number 13 jersey was not enough to stop an absolute beatdown in H-Town. The Nets shot 17 of 35 from 3 as a team, which is 48%, and scored over 30 points in every quarter. Pretty complete offensive performance. What guys did you make of the Rockets game?
Yeah, you said it there, Matt, H-Town, but really, let's face it, they should be called L-Town because the Rockets are a really bad team. I mean, I saw in the news today that they apparently have no plans to sell off their vets for picks. So I've no idea what they're planning on doing for their future, but I'll let some Rockets podcast somewhere work that one out. But it was all about James Harden, obviously. The Beard returns to Houston, picks up yet another triple-double, 2 in a row. We get 2 wins on the Texas road trip, which was great. Yes, there were some really fun moments in this one. Something that stood out for me was Kyrie. He wasn't having a good night at all, and then there was a timeout, and Steve Nash kind of took him to the side, kind of grabbed him by the face, and you could just tell he was kind of saying something like, "You know how good you are. It'll come. Don't worry about it. Just chill out." And then he went out, and I think he had a burst of about 10 points within a couple of minutes, which was really nice to see. And it just shows the relationship between the coaches and the team is really close. And it's nice to see that that link between the two. I mean, we knew that our bigs were going to eat in this one once we saw the starting lineup from the Rockets. The Rockets didn't have a guy over 6'5" in the starting lineup, which is really, really small ball. I mean, we try small ball, but they do it to an extreme level. And DJ and Clax had some really nice performances again. I said last week, obviously, that it was really important that we do get the 2 wins to keep the momentum and the confidence going into the break. We nearly managed to sneak ahead of the Sixers and go into the first seed going into the All-Star break. I was kind of keeping an eye on their game with the Jazz at the same time, And yeah, they somehow managed to sneak that one. But it's definitely coming. You can tell that we're going to sneak ahead of them at some point, and it's just a matter of time.
If the Spurs game was the Nick Claxton show, this was without doubt the Harden show. Triple-double again, and it's getting to the point where you're almost kind of expecting it, and that's an insane thing to expect from someone, but we're really getting to the stage as well where we're running out of superlatives to actually describe Harden, because he's just, every single night he turns up, and obviously turning up at your former team, you can either, it typically always goes really, really well, or it goes really, really badly. There's never kind of an in-between in these games, it feels. And yeah, Harden certainly stepped up and didn't kind of let the boos that you'd hear every so often throughout the game affect him. And yeah, Clax again was superb, 16 points in this one, 8 rebounds as well in kind of limited minutes. And I think he's just gone to show he can be an extra weapon in this team. And I've kind of said it in one of the Nets Facebook pages. I don't think it'll be too long before we see him as one of the starters in this team, because I think he is really that good. I think as much as we kind of blew them out and made things look really effortless, and I say that in the best kind of possible way, didn't really feel like we had that much tempo or really had to do an awful lot coming to second gear or whatever. Things did get a little bit tight in the fourth, but then we went on that streak and yeah, completely depleted that kind of comeback of Houston. So yeah, absolutely delighted that we managed to go 2-0 on this road trip, which I correctly predicted as well.
Oh, you sneak that in there. Nice. No, really, really cool. Always nice to win. Like, I think had there been a whole arena full of booing, baying Rockets fans, it might have played out a little bit differently, but there wasn't, and it didn't. So here we are. Yeah, really cool to get a couple of wins coming back, especially like you said, Aidan, off the bat after that Dallas loss. Excuse me. But yeah, really cool. So a nice, although it was just 2 games this week, a nice 2 games for us Nets fans, because we had 2 wins. So who can complain? Moving on to some listener questions.
Before we go on, should we maybe wait because we've got 8 minutes? Or will we fit them in that time? What I'm going to do is I'll go and plug my laptop in as well. But we would maybe fit in one listener question if we're quick.
Yeah.
I just need to turn the plug on.
Yeah.
Right, sorted.
Cool.
We might fit them both in. Can see how we do.
Yeah, we'll get one in. I think it's this first one's quite easy anyway. So, although it was just a brief week when it comes to games, just the 2, a very good week, all things considered, as Nets fans, with 2 W's to enjoy. But now it brings us on to some listener questions. The first one we got is from Paul Mack, who is a very, very trusty, valued member of our Discord community. Stays up for every Nets game. He is the absolute Nets Iron Man of that Discord server that we got going. It's a simple one. He says, has or will Claxton fill the void left by Big J? What do you guys think?
I don't think he has yet, but certainly has the potential to fill the void left by Jarrett Allen in some form. Obviously, 2 very different players. Clax has shown more kind of on the offensive end, whereas Jarrett Allen was more of a defender. So clearly different players there. Claxton can shoot, whereas Jarrett Allen just couldn't at all. So yeah, there's obviously that in his favour. He's a bit quicker than Jarrett Allen, but Jarrett Allen was obviously great for blocks, and obviously Claxton's got a few. But yeah, I think 2 kind of different players, but I think if we're to maybe make a kind of closer comparison on maybe what Clax needs to do to get on the same level as Jarrett Allen, perhaps I'd maybe say adding a little bit more weight. I think we have seen Clax bulk up a little since we last seen him on the court about a year ago. Whether that's just, it seems like it because we hadn't seen him in so long, but it does look, he just kind of looks a bit bigger. If he manages to add a few more pounds, I think that could certainly help him out on the defensive end. And yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say he's going to fill the void left by Jarrett Allen like for like, but certainly can fill that gap. And I mean, we lost one very promising centre, and we've got someone who could certainly be a very promising centre in the future for the Nets in that position.
Yeah, I tend to agree, Cammy. I think he's certainly not filled the void. I think he's softened the blow. I think you can look at it. He's a very, as you mentioned, he's a very different player, but he's definitely as talented as Jarrett Allen when obviously he was just starting out with the Nets. He'll never have the rim protection skills that Jarrett Allen has. Not many players in the league will. But he is a big and he's got good impact defensively due to his switching skills, which is obviously a different type of defense that Jarrett Allen didn't manage to kind of do too well. And yeah, he's definitely more naturally talented offensively. I think one thing about Nick Claxton that's kind of going under the radar, I mean, Jarrett Allen was obviously playing on a Nets team that wasn't great. It wasn't great at the time anyway, whereas Clax is playing on a really good team. And I think he's actually probably more of a valuable young piece than people are thinking. And obviously we heard some talks about the Houston Rockets actually wanting a young player back. And if the Nets were involved in any PJ Tucker talks, you've got to think they were asking for him because he is a very good young player. But yeah, I still think the Nets need someone in to kind of replace more of what Jarrett Allen did. But Claxton, yeah, softens the blow a bit.
No, yeah, I think you've absolutely perfectly illustrated. It doesn't cover it, but it does make it feel a little bit better to have him step in how he did. You guys have totally nailed it. Two very different, but I'd say equally two very different defensive styles. I think Nick Claxton is, like you say, a lot more switchy. He's a lot more kind of, his foot speed is a lot quicker, it feels like. Obviously, Jarrett Allen had great footwork for what he did. But I think in terms of just kind of covering sort of meterage on the floor, I think Nick Claxton's got a little bit more horizontal movement, whereas Jarrett Allen was all about vertical movement and getting up and blocking shots and stuff. So two very different players. I think Nick Claxton's probably got more of an upside offensively than Jarrett Allen, but obviously Jarrett Allen just knew exactly what his job was and what his role was and where his bread was buttered, and he was just all about just dunks and putbacks and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's I don't think I'll ever fully get over Jarrett Allen leaving, but Nick Claxton, yeah, definitely softens the blow a little bit. Cool. Should we come back in and do?
Yeah, go for it.
Is this a record that we've done 4 in the one podcast? I think it is.
Yeah, mad. Right.
Crazy. Are we just going right into it? Are you downloading it before you send us a link?
I like to download it because like my laptop just runs really slowly if I'm downloading it and trying to stream. So yeah, I'll be 5 minutes or so.
We've got Theo and then looking ahead.
Yeah.
Cool.
Super quick.
Nice on season.
Yeah.
Cool. So one last question from the listeners is Theo, our good friend, former guest of the show from Met the Criteria. He said, a thought experiment. Assuming we win 1+ rings in this initial scary era, what do you think the Nets look like come 2023-24? Do the big three re-sign? And will we still be contending? Or will we end up like a post-LeBron Miami, big market team with some great recent history, but stuck in a rebuild? What do you guys think?
It's a great question. Yeah, I probably would have reworded that and said, assuming we win 2+ rings, because I think that has to be the minimum goal for the Nets with this team that we've got at the moment. For some reason, I think this has probably changed over the last few weeks, but I see the team that we currently have, the core of it anyway, around for quite a long time. I don't know why, I just get vibes from Kyrie, Harden, Joe Harris, KD, Nick Claxton, Bruce Brown, that they're very happy with this team. And I think they can see that we've got so much potential and what we could do that they may stick around for quite a long time. But it's going to come down to winning, and it is really important to these guys. And if we can win consistently, then I do see that happening. I definitely see Kyrie and Harden re-signing long term. I just think that'll be enough for us to definitely contend for a long time anyway, especially come 23-24. And yeah, I would certainly hope KD does as well if his two pals hang around. Yeah, I see the Nets being dominant for a long time, and if we can keep that unit for the long haul, then we've certainly got a chance to be really successful.
Ideally, they all re-sign and we enjoy many more championships kind of after these one or two that will probably come in the next few years. But worst comes to worst, I was kind of having a wee dig into the free agent class of that year, and if they all kind of chose to leave in that summer, it's not like would be shorter options. Now, there are some options which would result in us playing a vastly different style of basketball to the one we're kind of playing now. Kind of some standouts are Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, Bradley Beal. I think LeBron James is also up for free agency then, but I think about past 40, yeah, it's maybe a bit past him then. But that said, he's still performing now, so I wouldn't put it past him performing well then still. But two players who did stand out on this list, and it will certainly pull on the heartstrings of lots of fans, is D'Angelo Russell and Caris LeVert. Now, obviously, I don't think I've hidden my love for D'Lo, and we're obviously all big fans of Caris LeVert here on the podcast. If we manage to win the title and then bring these guys back when realistically should be in their peaks, it would just be kind of nice. Like, it's went full circle. They were kind of given up to start it and advance it, and then to be rewarded by getting brought back whilst we're probably still competing. I'd like to hope that's the case. I think that would just be a really nice kind of way for things to go. But ideally, as I say, the big three stay around for a long time and we win lots and lots.
Yeah, that would be nice to get the band back together. Just having a look at the kind of the contract situation with the 23-24 season. So the only person that is owed money that far in advance is Joe Harris, who's going to be earning 19.9 million in that season. But literally, you've got no other money sort of tied up anywhere. Like you say, I think that would be great if KD, Kyrie, and Harden do stick around. Obviously, the pull of New York City is huge. They've all got obviously lots of fingers in different pies off the court, and just a place to do business. New York is obviously a really, really enticing place that time in that regard. Sorry, but I think something that we need to bear in mind is it was recently the 5-year anniversary of Sean Marks being the GM of this team. And I think, when he took over the team, we were a really, really dead out team. We had like a 20-win season, no stars, no picks. Fast forward a few years, we land KD, we sort of start making the playoffs and we land KD and Kyrie. Fast forward another year, we get James Harden, and we're on the precipice of this, hopefully, this sort of championship title winning dynasty level talent. Whether or not it comes to fruition remains to be seen, but that's a not unrealistic goal for this team now. So I think that Sean Marks has proven himself over the last 5 years that he's a very, very competent person to be building a team to achieve what he wants to achieve. So you've got to think that, while everyone else is playing checkers, he's playing chess, and he's thinking about, a post big three era, maybe building around Joe Harris and locking him in then. But, I've got no worries about the future at all. Like you said earlier on in this pod, Aidan, we're currently living in the good old days. So we need to just stop and think and just enjoy what we got going on now. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it in 2023. But, I've got all the faith in the world that this team has got enough nous to kind of be thinking what's going to be happening with us. And they've probably got a plan of attack already, and everything's bubbling away. Obviously, with the G League, as we're recording, the G League season has finished. But I think the GM of the Long Island Nets is also the head of scouting for the Brooklyn Nets. So if we can keep that coming in as like a factory, a production line of talent, and we're always looking at young and up and coming talent. So I think that'll massively play a part, as well as the free agents that you mentioned as well, Cammy. I wish we could dedicate a lot more time to that question because it's a really, really good question. Thanks for sending that in, Theo. But we're going to look ahead to next week now. Obviously, we're probably going to touch on the All-Star game a little bit next week, but we then have to wait until Thursday where we take on the Celtics, and then again on Saturday where we take on the Pistons. How do you guys think we're going to fare when the second half of the season resumes?
Well, we demolished the Celtics in both our previous meetings. Obviously, they demolished them in pre-season. Then in the kind of league, a few matches after it started, absolutely demolished them. And they're on a good run at the moment. I think they've won the last 4 heading into the game with us. But I'd like to think that we will be able to beat them. They've had kind of a few problems. Maybe haven't had players perform all to the same level or to the level they'd at least expect. So I'd like to think, hopefully, with Kyrie and KD both back, and Harden as well, the 3 of them will have more than enough to then get past Celtics. And as for the Pistons, they may have beat us not that long ago, but surely with all 3 of these guys, we will blow them out the water and then some, because they're the worst team in the league, or they're the second worst, one of the 2 anyway. And yeah, Jeremy Grant done bits against us last time, but I think we've certainly got to have learnt a lesson, and I think it'll be another kind of maturity test for us, if you like, in terms of how far we've come as a team. Have we learnt how to play against bad teams? Obviously, we've kind of corrected our record against the kind of rubbish teams lately, but that loss obviously was a rather frustrating one. Despite that loss and all that, I'm going to say we'll go 2-0 this week.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting week to see if the Nets can manage to continue their momentum, obviously, that we gained before the All-Star break. 2 really nice games to get us back into it, and I do fully expect the Nets to keep up their high standards. I was actually looking into it earlier on. It looks like the Celtics game will come too early for KD, actually. It looks like he's getting a scan on his hamstring on Friday, because I think his last scan was 2 weeks before, and it's then scheduled for 2 weeks after, which is on Friday morning. Hopefully he can get the all clear to play again, and fingers crossed all is good with his hamstring there. I still think the Nets can beat an average Celtics team with or without KD, just because we've seen Harden and Kyrie play really well, and I don't think the Celtics are up to much this year, to be honest. And we'll may see KD back for the Pistons game, but they maybe want to give him a few practices off before he starts playing again, play a few practices before he starts playing again, just to get his fitness back up, obviously, before going into the real thing. We need to beat this Pistons team, because that last game was just an embarrassment. And I think obviously we've been playing better against teams under 500, and we need to blow those out the water. And how nice would it be if Blake Griffin plays against the Pistons and dunks on his first possession? I would love to see that.
That would be absolute poetry in motion. Yeah, I'm going to agree with you guys. As sweet as it is to beat the Celtics at any time, I think in this very moment, I would get more excited about beating this goddamn Pistons team. But I'm with you guys. 2-0. We've got to be bringing it after this, after the season sort of resumes after all the star break. But we shall see. 2-0 across the board. Nothing but positive vibes on this podcast, like it is in the Nets locker room after a good win. But that'll do us. Thank you very, very much for listening, and we're going to see you next time. Thank you.